just 10, 20 seconds more, and then we are going to start our web talk on Guatemala. We're just waiting a tiny little bit, and then it's official. We are going to start. All right, then, I'd say we do it. So on behalf of Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for Freedom and Care International, we would like to welcome you to our web talk on Guatemala, Suffering and Silence. It's volume 4 of our series, The 10 Most Underreported Humanitarian Crises in 2020. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the two organizations who have invited you, I'm just adding some short information on them. Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for Freedom is, if you will, an agent of liberalism with offices in Germany and 60 countries worldwide. Foundation is offering civic education, international dialogues, and political counseling since 1958. Care International is a global confederation of 14 members working together to fight and end poverty in 104 countries worldwide. And in 2020, it implemented about 1,300 projects worldwide to fight and end poverty. We are just looking at the numbers. Okay, I guess we are okay. So just continue. As I said, it was CARE who published the report on the 10 most underreported humanitarian crises 2020. And it started, CARE International started this compilation of neglected crises hotspots in 2016. And 2020 and indeed had been a year obviously marked by COVID-19, a year which has marked hotspots, crises everywhere, while each and everyone had been in lockdown. Obviously, countries in crises had to try to grab the reality, and that's the reason why Guatemala made its entry into this CARE International list in 2020. So we're today dedicating our time, our 60 minutes to Guatemala, and just trying to highlight a little bit what is going on in Guatemala, what is the situation on the ground. Those who know Guatemala, obviously, it's a beautiful country, almost 17 million people, but a country marked by so many challenges, by so many crises. Starting with natural disasters, starting with droughts, obviously with many Guatemalans trying to flee poverty, going towards the United States, but as well fleeing not only poverty, but even hunger, criminal structures, a lot of corruption, not only in the political system, but each and everywhere. So a huge potpourri of challenges, which obviously marked Guatemala to be one of the crisis hotspots in 2020. What we try to do today in our 60 minutes is actually to just shed a little bit light on the situation on the ground in Guatemala, trying to check on political, economic, and obviously social circumstances, and try to highlight what is going on with the people. Is there a way out of this crisis? And as well, obviously, as we are trying to raise awareness, trying to figure out why on earth the world media have been so hesitant to cover Guatemala and the Guatemala challenges in 2020. So this is what we are going to discuss with our experts in our panel. And it is my great pleasure now to introduce you to our panel. That's what we are going to start now. I would like to start with Claudia Mendez Ariasa. She is a journalist, and we should have a video. We should have an image of Claudia, who's currently located in Guatemala City. Here we go. Here she is, as you said, in the rainy city of Guatemala City in Guate. She is. Claudia is a journalist with a wealth of experience in different media outlets. She has been working at El Periódico in the newspaper business, and is founder and co-owner of the radio and TV program con criterio. In 2016, she and a team of her colleagues received a prestigious prize, the National Prize for Journalism in Coverage News. So that's obvious. That's a great standard. So that's a great achievement. And her focus is on human rights, drug trafficking, and corruption. So thank you very much, Claudia, for being with us. Welcome. Bienvenida. We continue with Catalina Vargas Villamarin. Let's see if we have her picture, her video. Claudia is currently in Colombia, so let's see where Claudia is. Let's see if we can have a camera view on her. She is Regional Humanitarian Manager for Latin America and Caribbean at CARE International. Here she is. Hello, Catalina. She has been working in the field of international cooperation in the sector for more than 12 years and is in charge of the regional humanitarian strategy for CARE International for the region. So we are looking forward to get your insights on what is going on in Guatemala right now, and obviously to a little bit of highlight on the projects CARE International is implementing in Guatemala. So we're happy to have you. Bienvenida, Catalina. I continue with our panel, which is a purely female panel today. Continuing with our guest in Germany, it is Professor Eva Kalny. Let's see if we get Professor Kalny and her picture. Let's see. Camera review on Eva. Let's see. She is currently Professor of Sociology at Hochschule Esslingen. She studied ethnology and Spanish and conducted field research in Guatemala and Mexico. Her research and focus is on gender, social movements, human rights, and the whole region, Latin America, and in particular, Guatemala. So welcome, Eva Kalny, Professor Eva Kalny. I do not see her, so I hope we get a visual. Hello, Eva, can you hear me?
Yes, I can also see myself.
Okay, cool. Here she is, Professor Kalny. Thank you very much for being with us. And we've got the pleasure to have you with us, and you're going to give us a short impulse. We agreed on eight or 9 minutes to just give us an idea, a flashlight on the current social and political situation on the ground, a little bit an insight on the judicial system and the challenges the legal system in Guatemala is facing, and I guess a view on inequality, hunger, and everything. What makes the situation in Guatemala so challenging? So, Professor Eva Kalny, we're looking forward to get your input, please.
Yeah, many thanks for the kind invitation, and hello to our colleagues in Latin America, and also greetings to our listeners. Well, in fact, Guatemala is lucky enough to make it on the list and sometimes into the media as compared to El Salvador or Honduras in the same region in the Northern Triangle of Central America, sharing similar problems. The current situation of Guatemala is in fact a deep crisis of democratic structures. We have recurrent attacks against the very sense of democracy, which is independent judiciary, independent media. And while there are many political parties in Guatemala, most of them are not democratically structured political parties. So this is the situation now as Kamala Harris is present in Guatemala. Just to give you some background data, the population of Guatemala is majority indigenous, mainly Mayan. We have 23 languages, including Spanish, and very high levels of social inequality. Guatemala is not a poor income country. It is, in fact, a lower middle income country, but the Gini coefficient of income distribution inequality is very high. It's 48.3 in 2017 as compared to Germany, 29.7. And we do not have updated data on wealth inequality, which is much higher than income inequality. Already before the COVID-19 pandemic, we had it had the highest rate of chronic malnutrition in Latin America and the Caribbean. Chronic child malnutrition and stunting affects nearly half of all the children under the age of 5, and about 58% of indigenous children. And before the pandemic already, only 40% of Guatemalan families enjoyed food security. So the pandemic increased these very severe social effects. While in 2019, about half of the population of 17 million was living under the poverty line, which would be about 8.5 million. Now, approximately 1 more million people are expected to live in poverty. Guatemala is affected by climate change. It is, in fact, one of the regions most affected by climate change and by the related weather events. And especially the poorest population is particularly vulnerable to this climate change. The structural problems of the state can in part be explained by the fact that Guatemala is a post-war country. The peace accords, last peace accord was signed in December 1996. And during the civil war, impunity was prevailing, impunity with regard to severe human rights violations, including genocide by the Guatemalan army and security forces. So as an effect of this history and impunity, we do have a systematic problem of criminal networks within the state. Partly related also to drug trafficking. And as we know, this is a region which has a lot of problems of drug dealing, but also increasing planting and production. So Guatemala had the chance to have an international commission against impunity in Guatemala, but the government decided to stop it. It was a UN-based commission, and in its final reports after 12 years of work in 2019, the final report describes the state as captured, and they wrote that there was a mafia coalition among government members, private individuals, and I quote, who are willing to sacrifice Guatemala's present and future to guarantee impunity and preserve the status quo. In these joint investigations between the CICIG and the public ministry, about 660 people and more than 220 high impact cases were prosecuted. More than 70 highly complex criminal structures with significant economic, political, and media power were identified. The people persecuted include former presidents, former vice president, ministers, deputies, drug traffickers, and mayors. And one important part of the problem are the monopolies of companies, thanks to their political ties they have to protect themselves. So, and the corruption exposed by investigations showed that it has very negative effects in the health system, customs, penitentiary system, and the executive, legislative, and judicial bodies. I would like to refer to 3 events that did make it into the German and European press and give a bit of background to what actually happened. So one was the eruption of the Volcano Fuego on the 3rd of June 2019. Guatemala is a country with high risk of earthquakes, eruptions of volcanoes, and hurricanes, and a complete lack of preventive measures. As compared to Japan, for example, where we have a similar precarious situation, but very different way of handling it by the government. So natural diseases are very often used for corruption. There is an unwillingness to provide data. Up to now, it's not clear how many people died by the eruption, how many people lived in that region. Unwillingness to support survivors, and strong restriction to the right of access to information about what actually happened on the ground. So, and the other question is, why do people live in such zones of high risk? Because El Fuego is known to be very dangerous. This brings us back to the post-colonial past, the so-called liberal reforms in the 1870s, where indigenous population had to move and was forced to live, to work for the plantation industry. In this region of the country, it also includes coffee. And the coffee industry is historically very close connected to German and to German emigration to Guatemala, where Germans also took over land and indigenous people and forced labor. The second event, which also made it into the news in the last couple of years, was the Hurricane Eta and Iota in November 2020. Now, there is an international responsibility for climate change. It is not provoked by Guatemala. Hurricanes are now more often, they are stronger, and the region is highly vulnerable towards climate change. So the local aspect are palm plantations and other agro-industry culture like sugarcane, which make the region even more vulnerable to the effects of hurricanes. And we have to keep in mind this production takes place for export. Nearly all our products we're consuming now do contain palm oil. The plantation economy is linked to displacement of indigenous people and to violence, and the owners are still partly of European descent. Sugarcane is used for so-called green economy. And the last event were the protests in November 2020, where the Congress building was set on fire, and this also appeared in the German news. In a situation of recurrent protests, there have been practically no investigation about who set the fire, and very soon there started suggestions that it was organized by members of the current government or Congress. And there were very high level of police violence, and we can observe an increasing militarization of the police. Now, why did we have so many protests, which were not reported in the European news? Protesters wanted to defend independent judges. So it was against the infiltration of courts by criminal groups. They defended the work of the FESI, which is the Attorney General's Office Anti-Impunity Unit, and the Human Rights Ombudsperson. So this is also part of background of an ongoing manifestations. So what we can see with COVID-19, we have an increase in poverty and social inequality, practically no support for the population, and lack of organizational infrastructure for the vaccination, and the lack of willingness also to organize vaccines. There is a situation of global inequality of access to vaccines, but other countries in the region do better. The corruption related to the vaccine and to the COVID-19 pandemic and the vaccines is in part internally provoked, but also externally. Guatemala, as well as many other countries in the region, do have laws that require Congress to show all contracts that affect the budget. So there is a right to access to information with regard to budget. But the secrecy of the contracts with the pharmaceutical industry does not support these laws. So laws against corruption had to be undermined in order to get vaccines. So this is an international pressure on national countries, which is, increases local corruption. So as Guatemala is now celebrating this year 200 years of independence, we do have very strong internal colonialism towards indigenous population. The country is governed by what former leader of CICIG, Ivan Velasquez, called a dominant narco-kleptocracy. Guatemala has a president with Italian citizenship. High-ranking politicians and economic actors do have EU citizenship, also German citizenship, and related privileges. And we can observe shrinking spaces which affect the judicial independence and human rights defenders.
Right. Thank you very much, Eva. That was very, very kind. Thank you that you gave us an eagle-eye view to help us to zoom in on Guatemala and the challenges Guatemala is facing in the current situation and obviously in the future. Before I open the discussion, I would like to remind our audience that you may use the Q&A function in the menu you will find below the image. the video. We are looking forward getting your questions, your remarks, your comments, and we are more than happy to give it to our expert panel. So once again, thank you very much, Professor Kahnli, for this short impulse. I would like to open our discussion with Catalina representing Care International. Catalina, you're just a first comment on what you heard from Eva. How do you feel about this? How is the situation in your view?
Thank you so much. And I think Professor Kahnli said a really good explanation about the context. And definitely, when we're talking about Guatemala, it's important to mention that Guatemala has the largest and most dynamic economic in Central America. However, the country it's ranked among the 5 most unequal countries in the region, and it's important to mention that because there is an overlapping and different crises, and one of the key factors is related to the inequality and definitely differential social levels in country. When we are thinking about on the humanitarian situation on the ground, and it's important to say that there is a number of overlapping crises at this point. So we were talking about COVID and for sure about the different numbers, how, for example, until now, up to date, 0.02% of the population is only vaccinated. So the process is going really, really slow, affecting the different levels of the population and definitely the most vulnerable. On the other side, in November last year, we have Eta and Iota hurricane strike in countries with unprecedented numbers of affectation. We are talking about 4 million of people affected by the hurricanes, and definitely affecting in difference regarding gender, women and men. So we are talking about also migration and forced displacement, because definitely everyone is trying to leave the country to look for a better quality of life, and in that way there is a number of vulnerabilities that they are facing. And definitely we cannot forget the unprecedented scarcity situation regarding food security. There are different strikes to this situation. One of those, for example, the food prices, because despite the market support, speculation and uncertainty have been reflected in rising prices of basic grains, affecting food access for the majority of the population that definitely depends on the purchase of these goods. And informal work is definitely linked to the loss of income because of COVID situation. So just to provide a general comment before to enter in the details and numbers, I will say Guatemala is facing an overlapping level of crisis with a differentiated level of affectation for women and girls, and this is part of the approach of care in the region, is analyzing crises depending on the gender groups, and we will learn more in detail during this conversation what are those affectations.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Catalina. Claudia, your take on everything what you heard so far, and your take on the current situation in Guatemala, please.
Well, thank you very much for this kind invitation, and thank you for having me in this table of conversation and debate around Guatemala. If you were to ask me what is the image that better describes Guatemala in this time, in this situation, to a woman like me, a professional middle class, I will say I have not been vaccinated. I don't know about you. I assume most of you in this webinar have been vaccinated. Am I still waiting for my jab here? That's my number one. That's my number one worry. We run a program here, and we have these Twitter and Facebook surveys. Of course, they are not like scientific instruments to measure really the feeling of the people. But whenever we ask, what worries you this morning? What worries you this Monday? the audience comes back with the same answer. I want to be vaccinated. I want to cover myself, my family, my community from this pandemic. That's the number one preoccupation in the personal level. Of course, if you escalate the question to a community level, to a national level, the worries change. Or maybe I wouldn't use the word change. The worries scale, they get ample and ample. And I want to go back to some words of Professor Eva, because I think she touched the ground when she somehow described what is the state of Guatemala. And the state is this, captured apparatus by different corporations, because we have the illicit corporations, of course, that they want to have a hand in the state to work in their favor. That's the illicit corporations. And of course, we have to be aware of them. But then we have the criminal corporations wanting to have a hand in the state. And then is the political class, which Professor Eva said, political parties that are not democratically structured. So that's the state of the state today. So when you ask me, what's your number one worry right now? I will say again, I want to be vaccinated. I want to protect myself and my family from this pandemic. And why haven't we been able to get vaccines? Of course, there's the international market, the rich countries that get all the jabs, but then we have states around us like El Salvador, like Costa Rica, who were so successful. So my point is, it doesn't depend on the money. It depends in the ability of the political class, in the ability of the state to protect its people. So that's the state of the state. And those are the comments that I have after hearing Professor Eva and after hearing Catalina.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Claudia. Yeah, COVID-19 made a bad situation worse, right? Even worse, not only for Guatemala, obviously, where in the world it was just highlighted what is there in terms of inequality and injustice. So hopefully you will get your shot very soon, as the majority of the world is hoping for the vaccination. I would like to continue with Eva, Professor. Would you like to put on your audio? When researching on Guatemala, there is always an adjective which is popping up, a description saying Guatemala, a paradise for criminals, impunity greater than 90%. And you mentioned what is going on in the Attorney General office right now. There is a wish to just get hold of criminal structures in politics, but how efficient is it? You told me on Friday, I think you said that there was something going on trying to give it a backslash and just trying to immobilize this force to just go to the ground of corruption in politics. How is it going, Professor Kane?
Well, of course, it is a very complex process to get to be able to investigate, to make the case, to go to court, to have the judges. So it is a very complex process that involves very many people and different institutions of the state. So, for example, I can't remember which of the cases it was, but then we could read that the FESI had problems of getting police to actually capture. They had the order for capturing, but they had a problem to get the police doing the job. The judges who work on the high-risk cases are under very high pressure, and they do receive threats. The state of Guatemala should protect them according to some international decisions of the Inter-American human rights system, but the state doesn't do it. So, and the last years, in fact, the aim was to to capture also the two high courts of Guatemala. And this is a process we can see now, and the court, constitutional court, well, let's say the judges do not, cannot make a career as judges, just scaling up, but it is a very political process. Who will be a member of the high courts? So when Congress changes, also judges change. And now all the steps that we could see since the increased pressure against the CICIG in 2017 was to debilitate this judicial system. To remove, to pressure judges, to pressure the police not to do the job anymore. And that is something I guess that will be also discussed now with Kamala Harris, because there aren't many more structures left to really work against corruption.
Thank you very much. I mean, talking about freedom of expression and the freedom of just express opposition, Claudia, I guess you have had your experience, your fair share of experience working in Guatemala as a journalist. How dangerous is it to just go ahead and report on events who might not be nice for the government? How is your daily work life as a journalist in Guatemala?
We work under pressure. I will not speak about myself, but I would like to speak for my colleagues, and not my colleagues in Criterio only, but my colleagues in the Guatemalan press. Right now, 2 reporters are facing charges under the law of violence against women. What was the cause? The cause was that they were reporting on an employee of the Congress who was hired for a job, but then she was found apparently sending instructions via a chat to attack via Twitter to journalists. So when they published the story of the chats, her official chat to her official employees sending instructions on how to attack 2 political figures from the opposition, she claimed that she was being harassed by the 2 male reporters. So now they are facing a tribunal to respond to the questions. Were they harassing her or not? Guatemala has given important steps forward or toward fight violence against women. So we have a very, very repressive law against this violence. But as we advance and gave steps forward in this direction, we found women from the political scene using those laws to attack or to respond to political male opposition, or to the press, to reporters, and to people like my colleagues who are facing today a judge. That's one form to pressure and to limit the freedom of expression. The legal, as you can see, the economical. This, my colleagues, 2 colleagues and myself, we founded this company. I'm an entrepreneur. So when we founded this company, the economic model, the business model of our company is to rent space in a radio frequency, to rent a space in the television frequency, and then we sell it to corporations who want to promote their services or their goods through our program. We serve to a good audience, so that's what we offer. It's a very basic business model. And of course, we got important companies at the beginning of our program, but then came the CICIG affair, which Professor Kalni has described very well. And then our problem was not to speak in favor of or not to speak against of. It was the only fact of mentioning CICIG that really bothered, you know, these big corporations. So they, of course, they have the freedom to invest whatever they want, but in group they left, you know, the publicity and the acuerdos, los tratos, the publicity, you know, like deals that they had with us. So that's the economical, you know, threat.
Okay. Okay. So sorry to interrupt you, but it's just our time is running, and we just have to try to get each one on board. Thank you very much. But thank you very much for your insights. I just found that a report on an incident in March 2020. Obviously, Alejandro Giammattei, president of Guatemala, he used, as it was said, an antibacterial substance on journalists at the entrance of the Congress and called it an anti-journalist spray. And he said, I would like to impose a media curfew, but unfortunately that's not possible. So I mean, we have an idea of how your work life is going on if your president is using antibacterial spray to just mute journalistic opposition. Okay.
That's the narrative. That's the narrative.
That's the narrative, exactly. Catalina, please, we would like to move a little bit on your daily work life as a manager of CARE International in the region. Obviously, we're talking about Guatemala right now, a country that is facing that many challenges, and what we heard about in terms of poverty, in terms of, for example, 35,000 children in Guatemala die before the age of 5. I mean, this is just shocking numbers. How does the reality in Guatemala impact your work and the layout on all the projects you're planning for Guatemala? Where are you right now, especially in the midst of the pandemic?
Definitely. Thank you so much for that question, because unfortunately the context in Guatemala, Central America, and the region is getting worse due to the different crises being overlapped at this stage, affecting the most vulnerable populations. So in terms of response, CARE is doing a humanitarian strategy, trying to tackle to the different levels of vulnerability. As I mentioned before, CARE has a gender approach for the design and the implementation of the programs. So we analyze the different elements and how we can tackle those. So specifically in Guatemala, CARE is working in different sectors, being health, one of the first one, trying to strengthen health system, provide communication and awareness about hygiene measures, and for example, COVID prevention. We are also working in water, sanitation, and hygiene, because definitely ETA and IOTA affect all the water systems across the countries. We are talking about 4 million of people affected. So how we can ensure and support the restructure of the water provision and safe water access. Food, nutrition, and security is part of the key strategic areas for CARE in Guatemala, including food production continuity, and for example, cash and voucher assistance. This is a modality that we are increasing and scaling up because we need to provide incomes to this population that has not any more options for a work of a current income, and for sure gender equality. And Claudia was talking about the number of gender-based violence percentage being increased, and definitely because lockdown has imposed a different element in society. So women are at households, they cannot go outside, they cannot get access to justice systems, to the norms. So it has been a huge number of gender-based violence cases currently in Guatemala, and how we can prevent that, how we can work with community leaders. This is part of the key areas that CARE is working. We cannot forget climate change and resilience, because this is part of the key drivers of the current food insecurity crisis. We cannot forget the dry corridor and how we can ensure minimum access for people in those areas to provide agricultural systems and other ways of incomes. So it's important to work with women and economic empowerment to provide other areas to increase their livelihoods, how we can empower them and work with local actors. CARE is not working alone. We need to work with the field key actors to ensure sustainability on the actions that we are doing right now. So just to wrap up on that humanitarian angle, unfortunately, we need not to think in the humanitarian and current needs. We need to keep also an eye on the medium and long term, because most of the root causes of the situation that is happening right now can be linked to that. How we can ensure nutrition and food security, how we can prevent maternal death, how we can ensure health systems for this situation with COVID on top of the rest of the elements. So it's a constant work with civil society actors in the field to ensure women vulnerabilities are considered in a particular way. We cannot respond to everyone at the same time. We need to consider the difference between population, rural, urban, adolescents, women pregnant. So we need to adapt the response, and we need to ensure we are listening where we can be, where we can add a value in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Catalina. Yeah, we just have an idea of the vastness of the range of the scope of challenges you're facing on each and every day, to just know where to put your resources in. And as you are in charge not only of Guatemala but the whole region, I guess it's more of a 24-hour day. You need to just take on everything. I would like to, before continuing, I would like to take on the questions that are coming in. One is directed to Claudia regarding vaccination, and the question regarding how on earth can we pressure Guatemalan government to just allow more people to just have access to vaccination. In view of the time, I would love to ask our panelists to just answer as shortly as possible, so we can just have as much time possible left. Please, Claudia, vaccination.
Well, thank you for that question. And I believe it's just making people think how they felt, how relieved they felt when they got vaccinated and their families got vaccinated. And then remember the fear and how you were living under that fear, how it felt to be vaccinated, and how is it feeling to go out finally, without the fear that touching someone or breathing the air of someone else who might be infected might get to yourself the virus, and then you get the virus to your family. Just think of that. And it's a pandemic that has hit all of us the same, no matter where you are, no matter if you're in a rich country or in a poor country. So it's, the solution should be for everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm taking on another question from the audience asking, and Eva, I would like to direct it to you. There's a question regarding threats on the ground. When you are doing your field work, when you are out there, do you feel threatened? Do you feel intimidated by whoever?
Well, I always enjoy very much being in Guatemala. But I think those of us who do so, we develop our own way of handling the situation. So I know that I behave very differently in Guatemala City than I would behave in a German city when I walk around. And the situation on the ground depends very much in which region of the country you are, what exactly you're doing. I'm not doing media reports on corruption. It depends very much on which dangers you exposed yourself to. But in fact, I'm a bit worried. I think the situation is worsening now due to the very high levels of poverty and desperation.
Yeah.
So I think security situation is currently getting worse. and at the same time knowing that the judicial system is getting worse too.
Yeah.
So you know, if something happens to you, there will be no support, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So facing the brutal reality for anyone who's out in the field and trying to.
But we do have this very bad tendency that in tourist centers, the police is sent to protect tourists, not to protect the local population.
Yeah.
So there is a lack of police structure, and then it benefits tourists. It doesn't benefit local people who are in danger.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Eva. Another question coming from the audience is, you're mentioning gender in your piece. Why do you think the gender divide is still so vivid in Guatemala? Is it more than in other neighboring countries? It's an open question. Whoever would like to grab it. Catalina, you're nodding.
If I may, and yeah, definitely, if we can try to understand when we are talking about gender, what it means, and we are starting from gender, it's the right range of characteristics that are pertaining or creating differentiations between femininity and masculinity, depending on the context or depending on the biological sex, etc. So I will say in Guatemala, but not only, I mean, I will say Central and South America, definitely the cultural practices reinforce the machismo and gender inequities. And when I'm talking about machismo, I mean the strong masculine pride. So it's important to understand what are the differences between different population, to understand the context, but also provide a differentiated response. And I was just taking a simple example when I was talking about the humanitarian response. If you are providing hygiene kits, you cannot provide the same elements for a woman or man or woman pregnant. So you need to understand what are the differences. And the gender approach, it's important to understand how we can address different consequences of that situation, depending on gender, for sure, because gender-based violence means that because of a gender characteristic, there is an increasing of the violence. So it's important to understand that component that is mainstream across the society, and how we can intend to not reinforce those stereotypes about machismo, about women or male roles, but how we can deconstruct and empower women to take decisions, to take leadership, to take decisions and in that society. And I think it's a way trying to transform that division around gender.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Claudia, may I ask you, how do you feel about the CARE International list of the most underreported humanitarian crises in 2020? Is it actually helping Guatemala in any way to just make people more aware? Do you think it's a good tool for your country?
Oh, well, yes, of course. I mean, being aware of what's going on here, it's a way to help Guatemalans who are desperately, needing help. Right before, this call, I was getting a call from the reporter who works here in Criterio, and who was letting me know that one of the communities most affected by ETA and IOTA, the hurricanes that hit Guatemala in November, it has just been declared not able to be habitable. I mean, people shouldn't be there. So that means a community must be forced to leave the space where they have lived, all their life. And of course it helps to be reported, because one of the things it pressures government, to the famous territorial organization that we lack of. And internationally, yes, of course, but because we're not alone in this world. So it helps to pressure, authorities to do their work, and it helps people, to let them know, I mean, that there are full communities in need here of cooperation. Cooperation in different means, of course.
Eva, thank you very much. Eva, you signaled you would wanted to step in.
Yeah, I would like to add a little bit to your question on gender. I think we always have to see the combination of different structures of discrimination. So the intersection of ethnicity, gender and class, for example, is very important. It does make a difference whether you're a poor, rural, indigenous woman, or you do have some other, some privileges at least within this system.
Yeah.
And I would really like to call attention to the fact that Guatemala, there are very many strong women in Guatemala we can learn a lot from, and especially when we look at the judicial sector. There are several women who worked on very high level cases. Some of them had to go to exile. Yeah, but I think we can't imagine the Guatemalan human rights system and the judicial system without its women.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for this comment on gender. I'm taking on a question of Donia. She said, once again, what can be done to bring Guatemala to a public eye, to make it visible in the media? I give it to Catalina because obviously you're using this tool of the list since 2016. What are your experiences? Could you help to raise worldwide global awareness and bring it to countries? I know there's a lot of Africa in the list coming up, and Guatemala is one of the few countries in middle Latin America who made it to this list. Unfortunately, let's say unfortunately, because it's a crisis. But what are your experience with this tool, this list in the past?
No, definitely. I mean, I think there are different tools that we can use for this visibility awareness. So this is one of those that we are doing today. But for example, CARE has other, such as rapid gender analysis. You know, data. It's important because explore the numbers and the figures that are important for people to create awareness about the situation. So I think it's important on the release and how we can make visible numbers, but also stories that are in the ground, so people can have a picture about what is happening. And definitely, we understand Latin America and Guatemala can be distant from the reality in Europe, but definitely we are working hard to provide numbers, data, and storytelling about the context. So I will say it's a common effort from different levels. This year and just in the last month, we have the confirmation that it will be a humanitarian needs overview for Central America and specifically for Guatemala. This is a real success because it's a way to showcase what is happening, what are the people in need, what are the level of affectation from different population, and Professor Eva was mentioning about indigenous population that definitely has a differentiate impact. So with this tool that will be provided by the end of July, we can create awareness. We can create awareness on the population, but also on the institutional donors. So how we can invest in country, trying to mitigate those different efforts and trying to provide support to the most vulnerable population.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. As the time proceeds, we are almost in the last 6 minutes of our discussion. I would like to quote a report of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights published in January 2020, obviously before COVID hit the world. It says, in Guatemala, there's a challenging human rights context. We've got a persistent high levels of inequality, discrimination, insecurity, and impunity. So for our last minutes now, please, to all our three panelists, what are your thoughts on this? What are your hopes for Guatemala? What are the steps which have to be taken on an institutionalized level, but on a humanitarian level as well? What are your hopes for the future for Guatemala? Starting with, who would like to start? Ladies, it's you decide who starts first. In the last 5 minutes, please.
Okay, I will start with a call of action that is important, and I will say that all the organizations that are working to respond to the current crisis, it's important to address the structural causes of poverty and inequality. For sure, the evidence and the situation, it's important, but we need to go to more on the roots that are the direct cause of migration. We need to prioritize support to strengthen civil society, the local organization and institution. It's important to create capacity and sustainability on the ground. And definitely international organizations should reevaluate their work strategy in country to be more localized and more gender approach. And finally, I will say promote coordination among humanitarian organizations, not only at the national level, but also create awareness with a Central America and North Triangle situation that unfortunately is not getting better.
Okay, call for action indeed. Thank you very much, Catalina. Professor Eva, what were your ideas and hopes for the future when it comes to Guatemala?
Well, as I am now based in Europe, I think it's very important, be that in Europe or in Northern America, to understand that we are part of the problem. You know, we do have unlimited access to the resources, also the resources from Guatemala. What we consume comes from Guatemala or other countries in similar situations. The social structures on the ground, and I refer to internal colonialism, is deeply connected with European emigration, and especially with German emigration. Germans had a very important role in Guatemala. They still have a very important role in Guatemala. Germany implemented the Namibian law for forced labor in Guatemala. And indigenous men were forced to do this forced labor until 1944. This is very recent history. So I think we do have to be aware of our responsibility as we are here. Of course, a local actor has to focus on other issues. We are responsible for climate change.
Okay, important.
We are responsible for local structures like plantation industry that support export to our countries. Every cookie we eat has palm oil. It is linked to violence in other parts of the world.
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing in the European and particularly the German perspective into our discussion. Thank you very much, Eva. And now we're finishing off with you, Claudia. Please, your thoughts, your hopes for your country. You are the one who is currently sitting in Guatemala City. So
Yes.
Please,
Thank you.
Closing thoughts on Guatemala's future, please.
Thank you. And thank you very much for this invitation. This morning, very early in the morning, we have this interview with this indigenous women leader of entrepreneurs and business corporations in the indigenous circle. And she said some powerful words that I want to reply and replicate here in this webinar. She said something like, stop treating us as beneficiaries, start treating us as counterparts. So I will say that stop treating us, as if we were a different humankind. We are exactly the same. So back to the question of one of the attendees of this webinar, what do we need to do to pressure our governments? Stop treating us as beneficiaries. Treat us as you would like to be treated yourselves. And think about the development in Guatemala. Was thinking as I was hearing this indigenous woman, wow, she's so powerful and she has, this very strong authority to say this. What happened with her? She had an education and she has a place in her community and her society. She's an entrepreneur and she's treated as an entrepreneur. So what do we need? It's, to replicate, her experience, to have universal education. So the more educated the population is, the more we will respect, human rights, lives, and freedom. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claudia. Beautiful finishing word, and just highlighting the importance of being aware of the partnership in crises. Right, we are all partners and equal, and should be treating each other with respect and trying to move forward in such a challenging situation under COVID-19 circumstances. So by saying that, I'm very happy. Thank you very much for your time in the audience, and obviously thank you very much to our panel. Thank you very much, Catalina. Thank you very much, Claudia. And obviously, thank you very much, Eva, for being with us, for giving us perspective, for giving us ideas and hopes for Guatemala. And with this said, we'd like to draw your attention to June 14th. Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for Freedom is continuing the series on suffering in silence, and that particular day, June 14th, it will be Madagascar. So this is Counternational's another hotspot under the crises June 14th, Madagascar. But once again, thank you very much. Muchas gracias for being with us on this important day and time for Guatemala. Hopefully, we are hoping for the best and for all and each and everyone who's working and fighting on the ground each and every day. Our best wishes. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and get your shot, Claudia, and each and everyone. Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure having you on board and seeing you soon.